On a cold winter night in Pineview Hills, the whole neighborhood looked peaceful, almost like a picture from a holiday card. Snow covered every roof like a soft white blanket. The air was quiet, still, and freezing. Streetlights glowed through the falling snow, creating a calm, almost magical scene. Most people were inside with warm drinks, thick blankets, and movies playing in the background. It was the kind of night where no one wanted to go outside. But someone was outside. And she was not doing anything peaceful. Her name was Karen Thompson, but everyone in the neighborhood called her HOA Karen. She didn't know about the nickname, but if she did, she would probably fine everyone $50 each, because that's just the kind of person she was. Karen wasn't just part of the HOA, she controlled it. She treated the neighborhood like her kingdom, and she believed everyone had to follow her rules exactly the way she wanted. If someone painted their mailbox one shade too bright, Karen would show up at their door with a clipboard. If a neighbor's Christmas lights stayed up one day longer than her schedule allowed, she would take pictures and send threatening emails. If a kid's bike was left outside, even for 3 minutes, she would write a warning letter. People pretended to be polite to her, but deep down, they were tired of her bossy behavior. Tonight, however, Karen was not going door to door checking mailboxes or decorations. No. Tonight, she had a completely different plan. She stood behind her house, her winter coat half-buttoned, her boots sinking into the deep snow. In her hands was a large cardboard box with bright red letters. Fireworks, danger, do not use in winter. The box was almost too big for her to hold, but she carried it with the confidence of someone who believed rules never applied to her. A strange smile stretched across her face as she looked around the silent neighborhood. Let's see what they say after this, she whispered to herself. Her plan was simple, but very, very stupid. She wanted to set off a fireworks show of her own. In the middle of winter. During a storm. Next to a mountain. Earlier that day, the news had warned everyone, avalanche risk is extremely high. Avoid loud noises near the mountain. Even the radio repeated the message every hour. Most people listened carefully. After all, they lived at the base of a giant snowy mountain. They knew the danger. But Karen didn't care. She believed nothing dangerous could happen if she was the one in charge. And she was angry, very angry. A few neighbors had refused to follow her winter decoration rules, and she wanted to teach them a lesson. She said the neighborhood looked ugly and unorganized, and she was tired of people ignoring her leadership. So now she was planning a grand winter fireworks show without telling anyone. The wind blew around her face as she opened the box. Inside were dozens of fireworks, big ones, bright ones, loud ones, the kind used for huge celebrations, not small backyards. She didn't care that the snow was deep, the mountain was unstable, and the wind was strong enough to shake the trees. She didn't care about anything except her own pride. She set up the largest firework on a flat patch of snow behind her house. The sky was dark and quiet, the kind of quiet that feels almost too calm, like the world is holding its breath. A few houses away, a family noticed her outside. Is she doing fireworks? The mother whispered through the window. No way, the father said. Not tonight. Not with this weather. But when he squinted his eyes, he saw the truth. Karen was lighting a fuse. A bright spark began crawling toward a giant firework shell. Oh no, the mother gasped. Somebody should stop her. But it was already too late. A loud explosion ripped through the silence. Boom! The sound bounced off the mountain and echoed through the whole valley. Dogs in the neighborhood began barking. Lights turned on inside houses. People came to their windows, confused and shocked. Fireworks shot up into the sky, bursting into huge red and green stars. The entire snowy landscape lit up like daytime for a moment. Some kids looked out their windows in amazement, others cried from the noise. On the other side of the neighborhood, an elderly couple looked up in fear. Who's doing fireworks? The old man asked. That's dangerous, his wife said. They warned us all day. The fireworks kept exploding. Boom! 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 Each blast was louder than the last. But then something else happened. Something no one expected. A deep rumbling sound echoed from the mountains. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't wind. It was something much heavier, something alive, something moving. A low growl rolled across the snow-covered valley. At first, people didn't understand what they were hearing. They looked around confused. The rumble grew louder, deeper, scarier. The ground trembled slightly beneath the neighborhood. Pictures on walls shook. Snowflakes fell from rooftops. Inside one home, a man froze and whispered, "No, that can't be." But it was. Up on the mountain, a huge sheet of snow cracked. A loud, sharp crack echoed through the night like a giant breaking a tree in half. A massive wave of snow began sliding down the mountain slope. Slow at first. Then faster. And faster. And faster. The avalanche had begun. People ran to their windows and saw the snow racing down the mountain like a white river, swallowing everything in its path. Trees were being pushed aside. Snow clouds rose into the air. Everyone out. Run, someone shouted from their porch. Panic spread through the neighborhood like fire. Meanwhile, Karen was still behind her house, staring at the mountain with her mouth open. Her fireworks box slipped from her hands, falling into the snow. She suddenly realized what she had done. "Oh no, no," she whispered, stepping backward. But the avalanche didn't care. It was coming. And it was coming fast. People grabbed their children, their pets, their coats, anything they could. Cars tried to start. Doors slammed. Feet pounded on frozen ground. The entire neighborhood moved in panic, shouting warnings, screaming at each other, trying to get to safety. The rumbling grew louder, so loud it felt like the air itself was shaking. Karen turned to run, slipping in the deep snow. Her house shook as the white wall of snow crashed closer and closer. Her fences broke under the pressure of the wind and snow. Everyone screamed the same thing. Run! And in that terrifying moment, the peaceful winter night turned into a nightmare, all because of one woman and her selfish fireworks. The avalanche roared down with unstoppable power. And that is where the real story begins. The avalanche had not hit the homes yet, but everyone in Pineview Hills could feel the danger growing. People stood outside their houses, still confused, still trying to understand what was happening. Snowflakes fell gently from the sky, but beneath that soft beauty was a growing tension, like the air itself was waiting for something big to happen. Hours before Karen fired the first firework, there were already warning signs. Signs that everyone noticed, except her. Earlier that afternoon, the neighborhood chat group was full of messages about the weather. Residents were sharing pictures of the mountain, where small lines had already begun forming on the snowy surface. These thin cracks were nature's warnings, tiny fractures on the edge of disaster. One man, Mr. Jacobs, an older resident who had lived there for 30 years, posted a message. "Snow looks unstable today. Please avoid loud noise near the mountain. Avalanches start fast." Most people thanked him. Some people double-locked their doors. But one person read the message and laughed. Karen. She stood inside her kitchen, drinking her afternoon tea, reading the warnings with a smirk on her face. "These people don't know what they're talking about," she said to her cat, Snowball. "If the snow was so dangerous, someone official would come knocking on my door. I'm smarter than these people." Her pride blinded her from the truth. Outside, the signs grew stronger. Wind blew faster, whistling sharply through the neighborhood like an alarm. Even children playing in the snow noticed something strange. When they jumped on the ground, the snow didn't feel soft anymore. It felt tight. Hard. Packed too heavily. One little girl told her mother, "Mommy, the snow sounds different when I step on it." Her mother smiled gently but felt a bit uneasy. She had heard the weather warning too. She was just hoping it wasn't as serious as it sounded. Meanwhile, 2 houses away, Mr. and Mrs. Patel stood in their backyard staring at the mountain. "I don't like this," Mr. Patel said. "The snow should not look like that," his wife replied. "It's too smooth. Too heavy. They grabbed their phones and checked the avalanche alert site. The danger level was bright red. High risk. Stay alert. Avoid loud sounds. The whole neighborhood knew the risk. Except the one woman who should have been the most responsible because she was the HOA leader. But Karen believed she controlled everything. She believed the mountain would not dare do anything without her permission. That evening, when the first heavy winds hit, some neighbors even knocked on Karen's door to warn her. They found her in her driveway, arranging the fireworks box like a general planning a battlefield. "Karen, what are you doing?" a neighbor named Lily asked, shocked. Karen didn't even look up. "Preparing for a winter celebration," she said proudly. "In this weather?" Lily asked. "There are avalanche warnings everywhere." Karen laughed loudly. "Oh please. These warnings are exaggerated. People love drama." Lily pointed at the mountain. "We're at the base of that mountain. Loud sounds can set off snowslides." But Karen's face hardened. "Lily," she said, folding her arms, "as the HOA president, I decide what is safe and what is not. You follow rules. You do not tell me what to do." Lily shook her head and walked away, frightened. Another neighbor, Mr. Chen, approached her after hearing the conversation. He tried to stay polite. "Karen, please reconsider. This is dangerous. The ground is already shaking slightly. I felt it earlier." Karen squinted her eyes at him like he was an enemy. "Mr. Chen, do you want a fine for a messy trash bin from last week? Because I can still issue that." He sighed and stepped back. There was no point arguing with her. There never was. As night approached, clouds thickened over the neighborhood. The moon disappeared behind the storm. Streetlights flickered, giving the evening a strange, eerie feeling. Inside their homes, families prepared for the storm: extra firewood, portable lights, warm blankets, small safety steps in case the weather got worse. But Karen wasn't inside. She was dragging fireworks across the snow, setting them up one by one, humming happily to herself. From his window, a teenage boy recorded her on his phone. "Mom! Mom! She's putting fireworks in the snow." His mother rushed over and gasped. "Oh my God, she's actually doing it." Others noticed too. Windows lit up with silhouettes of worried faces. People whispered, "Is she insane? Why now? Someone stop her." But no one wanted to argue with the woman who fined them for leaving a leaf on their lawn. At 9 p.m., the warning signs became impossible to ignore. A loud cracking noise echoed across the mountain. It was faint but sharp, like ice breaking inside a freezer, but much louder and deeper. Some people stepped outside their homes, frozen in fear. "What was that?" a man asked. His wife whispered, "That sounded like ice shifting." The wind grew stronger, carrying a deep rumble from the mountain. Snow-covered trees bent slightly under the pressure. Even the ground felt different, heavier, colder. But Karen heard the same sounds and shrugged. "It's just the wind," she said aloud. "These people panic too easily." At 9:14 p.m., the official emergency alert came through everyone's phones. A loud alarm beeped. People grabbed their devices nervously. Avalanche warning: loud noises can trigger snow movement. Avoid outdoor activities. Everyone read the alert. Everyone stayed indoors. Except Karen. She read the alert and muttered, "Drama. Pure drama." Then she pulled out the lighter. By 9:30 p.m., many neighbors had given up trying to change her mind. They locked their doors. Some prayed. Some waited in silence. Some watched helplessly from windows, ready to call emergency services if something went wrong. At 9:32 p.m., the mountain made another deep rumbling sound, louder this time. The snow dust near the top began drifting down. It looked like mist. A quiet warning. A whisper of the disaster brewing above. Inside his home, old Mr. Jacob stood at his window and whispered, "If she lights just one firework, just one, we're in trouble." He was right. At 9:34 p.m., Karen bent down, lit the fuse of the first firework, and stepped back proudly. The spark shot across the snow. Neighbors held their breath. Then, boom! The first explosion echoed into the mountain like a hammer hitting glass. The second one came right after. Boom! Boom! Lights burst into the sky, shining through the storm clouds. But the beauty lasted only seconds. Because the mountain answered back with a thunderous, angry roar. The snow cracked, shifted, and began to fall. This was no small slide. This was the kind of avalanche that could erase a neighborhood. And as the white mass began racing down the mountain, the whole neighborhood finally understood. Karen hadn't ignored the warning signs. She had destroyed them. The avalanche had begun its deadly journey down the mountain, but at the moment Karen lit her final firework, no one truly understood just how much danger they were in. For a few seconds, the neighborhood was stuck between two worlds, one filled with bright lights exploding in the sky, and the other filled with a dark, rumbling disaster racing toward them. The night sky lit up in flashing colors as Karen's fireworks burst into loud explosions. Red, green, and gold sparks rained down through the falling snow. The noise was deafening, bouncing off the mountain walls like thunder trapped in a canyon. But something strange happened after the third firework exploded. The sound didn't fade away like normal. It echoed longer. Louder. Stronger. As if the mountain itself was answering back. Karen stepped backward, the smile falling from her face. She expected applause, attention, or neighbors complaining so she could scold them. But instead, she saw people standing motionless in the distance, on their porches, in their yards, and behind their windows. They weren't angry. They weren't talking. They were terrified. What? Karen said to no one. Why are they staring at me like that? Then she heard it. A deep cracking sound rolled across the valley. Krara-aak. It sounded like the earth splitting open. Karen froze. The neighbors didn't. They immediately understood what was coming. They had seen the warning signs all day, and they had felt the ground shake earlier. Now everything was crashing down at once, literally. A man shouted from the other side of the street, pointing toward the mountain. Look! Karen turned. Her heart dropped. A massive section of snow, bigger than any building she had ever seen, broke free from the mountain's side. It rolled downward slowly at first, almost quietly. But then the ground shook again, and the snow picked up speed. Faster. Harder. Louder. The white wall grew bigger and bigger, swallowing everything in its path. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Snow clouds exploded into the air. The rumble turned into a roar. The avalanche was no longer a distant danger. It was coming straight toward them. No! Karen screamed. This can't be happening. But it was. And the entire neighborhood had only seconds before the avalanche crashed down. Karen's panic begins. Karen dropped her lighter, her breath freezing in the air. Her mind raced. She looked at her house, then at the mountain, then at the fireworks box sinking into the snow. Suddenly, all her excuses, all her pride, all her power, none of it mattered. The avalanche didn't care who she was. It didn't care about HOA rules. Or fines. Or winter decoration guidelines. Nature was coming with full force. Karen tried to run toward her house, slipping and stumbling in the snow. Her boots weren't tied properly, and she fell face-first into the snowbank. She pushed herself up, shaking, screaming at herself. Get up! Get up! Her voice cracked as she ran toward her back door. The wind from the oncoming avalanche pushed a cold rush of air behind her, like a giant breathing down her neck. Meanwhile, neighbors shouted warnings. Everyone to higher ground. Get the kids. Run. Now. One family, the Parkers, grabbed their sleeping children from their beds and carried them out the front door, still wrapped in blankets. Their dog barked wildly, trying to break free from its leash. Mr. Patel from the next house over shouted, "To the hill! Move. Don't stop. People began running toward the only safe place, the small emergency shelter built on a raised hill at the edge of the neighborhood. Karen looked back over her shoulder and saw the avalanche growing larger. It was almost unbelievable, like watching a giant white monster roll down with unstoppable power. She could barely breathe from fear. This is because of me," she whispered. For the first time in years, Karen felt something unfamiliar: guilt. The last firework. Karen reached her porch steps, but just as she grabbed the railing, a loud hiss sound came from behind her. She froze. She knew that sound. It was another firework, one she had dropped, but whose fuse had still been burning under the snow. Now it burst from the ground, flying straight into the air. Whoosh, boom! The explosion lit up the entire neighborhood like a bright flash of lightning. It also made the avalanche faster. The sudden shock in the air seemed to push the rolling snow harder. The roar of the avalanche became so loud that it drowned out every other sound: screaming, barking, shouting. Everything disappeared under that monstrous sound. Karen stumbled backward at the explosion. No! Please stop! Stop! But fireworks do not listen. Mountains do not listen. And avalanches never wait. The avalanche approaches. Children cried as their parents pushed them uphill. Cars tried to drive, but the roads were too icy. People slipped, fell, got back up, and kept running. The ground vibrated like an earthquake. Snow from rooftops slid off. Icicles cracked and fell. Windows shook violently. Inside one house, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly widow, struggled to lift her cat carrier. She couldn't move fast enough. Her hands trembled. A teenage boy saw her through the window. "Mom! She's stuck!" Without waiting for permission, he ran to her door and banged on it. "Mrs. Thompson! Open up! Let me help!" Things were happening everywhere at once: panic, chaos, bravery, fear, all mixing together in one overwhelming moment. And through all of it, Karen was frozen on her porch, staring at the oncoming avalanche. She felt the snow already hitting the lower end of her street, just small waves for now, but growing rapidly. "This can't be real," she whispered. "This can't be my fault." But she knew the truth. The truth was racing down the mountain toward her. The first hit. The avalanche reached the first row of houses. A massive wave of snow slammed into backyards, breaking fences, burying patios, and shattering small sheds. The sound was like the world itself cracking apart. Snow shot into the air like a huge white explosion. Karen screamed as the wave hit the ground near her home. "Help! Somebody help me!" But everyone else was running for their lives. The snow hit her yard with incredible force, smashing her garden decorations, flipping her patio chairs, and bending her metal fence like it was made of plastic. She grabbed her door handle and yanked it. Locked. She had locked it earlier. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she tried to unlock it. The key slipped from her fingers into the snow. No! No, no, no! The wind from the avalanche hit her back, almost knocking her over. She fell again. Behind her, the second wave of snow came roaring down. Karen makes the worst choice. Instead of running with the others toward safety, Karen crawled toward the fireworks box, her pride still clinging to the stupid idea that she could fix everything. "If I remove them, maybe it will stop." Her voice trembled. She grabbed the box, but her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it. Fireworks rolled out onto the snow, their colorful labels bright against the white ground. One of them sparked. "Oh no, not again." Karen backed away, slipping and falling. The spark slowly crawled up the fireworks fuse. The mountain roared louder. Neighbors screamed her name. But it was too late. Boom! The firework exploded again. The avalanche surged forward with full force. And then, darkness. Snow swallowed her backyard. Snow swallowed her fence. Snow smashed against her porch. And then, Snow hit Karen. And everything went white. The moment the avalanche reached the first houses in Pineview Hills, the peaceful winter neighborhood transformed into a scene no one could have imagined. The snow didn't fall gently. It didn't drift softly. It attacked. A giant white wall rushed forward like a raging ocean wave made of ice. It tore through everything: fences, swings, trees, rooftops. The sound was so loud, people felt it in their bones before they heard it in their ears. It was like the roar of 1,000 storms crashing together. For a moment, the entire world became white. And then, chaos. The neighborhood struggles to survive. The snow slammed into the first row of houses with brutal force. Glass shattered. Walls cracked. Cars were lifted off the ground like toys. People screamed. A young girl named Mia clung to her mother as the snow burst through their backyard fence. The mother grabbed Mia and climbed onto the kitchen counter as water, ice, and snow flooded into the house. "Stay up here. Don't fall," she shouted, her voice shaking. Meanwhile, the Parkers, who were running uphill with their 2 children, felt the ground tremble beneath them. Mr. Parker looked back and saw the white wave chasing them. "Hurry! Don't look back," he yelled. Mrs. Parker cried as she held their baby, sprinting as fast as she could. Across the street, an older man named Mr. Dawson was trying to drag his wife, who had hurt her ankle earlier that evening. The snow kept getting closer. "We need to move," he said, pulling her toward the emergency hill. I'm trying," she cried. Neighbors saw them and immediately rushed to help. A young couple grabbed Mrs. Dawson under each arm and carried her forward. "Don't give up," they said. "We won't leave you." The avalanche was destroying everything, but humanity's kindness was shining through the panic. Inside the storm of snow, the avalanche didn't stop at one wave. It came in layers, each one stronger. The second wave slammed into the homes at the center of the neighborhood. Snow blasted through doors and windows, filling rooms instantly. Inside one house, 3 teenage brothers grabbed blankets, wrapped themselves together, and held onto the banister. "Don't let go," the oldest brother shouted. The snow flooded the entire first floor, pushing furniture, breaking tables, and knocking open every cabinet. Plates and cups flew everywhere. The house shook like a boat in a hurricane. The boys screamed, trying to keep their balance as the snow reached their knees, then their waists. "Hold on," the youngest cried. But the avalanche had no mercy. Karen buried alive. Under the porch of her own home, Karen Thompson, HOA Karen, the woman who started everything, was now fighting just to breathe. The avalanche threw her into a deep pocket of snow, trapping her between her fallen fence and a mound of ice. Her face was pressed against the freezing wall. The snow around her was heavy, too heavy to move. She tried to scream, but the sound came out weak, muffled by the layers of snow. "Help, help me," she whispered. Her hands were freezing. Her legs were stuck. Her chest felt tight, squeezed by the weight of the snow. The darkness around her felt endless. And the worst part? She heard the sounds of the neighborhood, the screams, the breaking wood, the rushing snow. She heard everything. "This is my fault," she whispered to herself. Her voice trembled. Her pride vanished. Her control vanished. All that remained was fear. The hill becomes a lifeline. The emergency shelter on the hill, built years ago and never used, now became the only safe place. People ran toward it with every bit of strength they had left. Mr. Patel held his wife's hand tightly as they climbed. "Don't stop. You can do this." Behind them, the teenage boy who had helped Mrs. Thompson carried the old woman on his back while his mother guided him. "You're doing great, keep going," his mom said through tears. Children cried. Dogs barked. Adults shouted directions. But everyone kept moving upward. At the top, some men stood in the doorway of the shelter, pulling survivors inside. "Come on," one yelled. "Hurry!" A large man named Carlos grabbed 2 people by the arms and dragged them to safety. "Don't worry. You're safe now," he shouted. But he wasn't done. He ran back out into the swirling snow again to help more people. The avalanche kept coming. The cold winds slapped against their faces. Snow stung their skin like tiny needles. The entire mountain seemed to have come alive, angry, and unstoppable. But inside the shelter, the first group of survivors huddled together, crying, shaking, but alive. Outside, Carlos saw another family approaching, Mr. and Mrs. Parker, holding their children. "Come on. You're almost here," he yelled. But the snow behind them was rising again. The third wave, the most dangerous one. The avalanche wasn't done. The third wave was the biggest, the strongest, the fastest. It hit with a booming, earth-shaking force. Houses in the lower area were completely buried. Roofs collapsed under the pressure. Cars disappeared entirely under the snow. Trees snapped like they were nothing. The neighborhood looked like it was sinking. The Parkers fell forward as the ground shook under them. Mrs. Parker almost lost her grip on the baby, but Mr. Parker caught her arm just in time. "Gio," he screamed. The snow reached their feet, climbing higher, pushing against their legs. Carlos ran toward them, fighting the wind, squinting through the blowing snow. "Give me the baby," he yelled. Mrs. Parker handed the baby to him, tears streaming down her face. Carlos turned and ran toward the shelter as fast as he could. The snow hit the Parkers from behind, knocking them to their knees. "No!" Mr. Parker shouted. He grabbed his wife and tried to pull her up. The snow kept pushing them down. Then two neighbors ran out, grabbed them, and carried them toward the hill. "Don't stop! Keep moving," one shouted. Seconds later, the third wave crashed into the street below like a white tsunami. The neighborhood collapses. One house at the bottom of the hill shook violently. The entire structure groaned, then split in half as the snow hit it. A giant crack ran down its wall. Another home was completely lifted off its foundation and pushed several feet forward before collapsing. Cars that were parked near the street signs were thrown sideways, some rolling over like toys. Electric lines snapped, sending bright sparks into the night. One pole fell into the snow and vanished instantly. The neighborhood was no longer a place of homes and gardens and fences. It was a battlefield of broken structures and buried roads, everything covered by a thick, suffocating layer of white. Inside the shelter, the survivors watched the destruction from the windows of the hill shelter. The glass fogged from their breath as they pressed their faces against it, desperate to see who else was coming. "Where's Karen?" someone whispered. Another person said angrily, "She caused this." But even then, some people felt guilty. "Even if she caused it, she's still human," a woman said softly. "She must be terrified." But no one knew where she was. No one had seen her since the avalanche hit her yard. The shelter grew colder as the storm continued outside. Blankets were passed around. Parents held their children close. People cried quietly. The mountain was still rumbling. Everyone feared another wave. And somewhere under hundreds of pounds of snow, Karen was trapped. Her breath was slowing. Her body was freezing. And she was alone. Inside the small emergency shelter on the hill, the survivors huddled together in silence. The walls shook from the storm outside, and the wind howled like a wild animal trying to claw its way inside. People were crying, breathing fast, whispering prayers, holding hands. But one question filled the room like a heavy shadow. Who didn't make it? And who was still out there? The avalanche had hit so fast and so violently that no one knew the full damage. Some people were safe inside the shelter. But many families were missing neighbors who had been closer to the mountain, closer to the danger, closer to the deadly waves of snow. The room felt tight. Suffocating. Cold. The storm outside was still roaring. Suddenly, the shelter door slammed open. Carlos, the big man who had been dragging people to safety, stumbled inside, covered in snow from head to toe. His face was red from the freezing wind, and his hands shook as he held the Parker baby tightly against his chest. I got him," he said, breathing hard. Mrs. Parker ran forward and took the baby, sobbing with relief. "Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you." Carlos tried to smile, but his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the floor. Two neighbors rushed to lift him onto a chair. "Are you okay?" one asked. "I'm fine," he said, catching his breath. "But we're not done." Everyone froze. "What do you mean, not done?" someone asked. Carlos wiped snow from his beard and pointed toward the destroyed neighborhood. "There are people still out there," he said. "A lot of them." A wave of fear swept through the room. Mr. Patel stood up. "We need to start a rescue. Now." "But the avalanche," someone whispered. "The storms," another said. "We can't just sit here." Mr. Patel shouted. "People are buried. People are trapped. Every second we wait, someone could die." There was silence. Then slowly, one by one, several men and women raised their hands. "We'll go," they said. "The search begins." They formed a rescue team of 9 people, including Carlos, Mr. Patel, the teenage boy who helped Mrs. Thompson, a nurse named Amelia, and several other neighbors. They grabbed everything available: shovels, flashlights, ropes, blankets, even metal trash can lids to use as digging tools. Some wrapped scarves around their faces to keep the cold air away. The wind outside was brutal. Snow hit their faces like sharp needles. They could barely see 10 feet in front of them. But they stepped into the storm anyway. For the people still missing. For the people they loved. For the people who had not made it to the shelter in time. As the rescue group moved down the hill, the world looked completely different. The neighborhood was gone. Not destroyed, buried. The streets were mountains of snow. Houses were giant soft white shapes, only roofs or chimneys sticking out. Cars were invisible, hidden beneath layers of ice. Mailboxes stood alone like frozen statues. Everywhere, the wind howled and the snow swirled. "This doesn't look like home anymore," whispered the teenage boy. "No," Carlos said quietly. "It doesn't." First rescue, the Dawson family. They reached the first buried home, the Dawsons. The rescue team shouted their names. "Mr. Dawson. Mrs. Dawson. Can you hear us?" Nothing. Carlos knocked on the top of the snow-covered door. "Hello? Anyone inside?" A faint sound came from inside the house. "Help, help us," a weak voice said. "It's them!" Amelia shouted. The team started digging like their lives depended on it. They shoveled in a frenzy, throwing snow in every direction. Their hands were numb. Their backs hurt. But they kept digging. 10 minutes later, they cleared enough snow to open the top of the front door. Inside, Mr. Dawson was holding his wife close to keep her warm. Snow had filled most of their living room. "We thought we were done," the old woman cried. "Not today," Carlos said, helping her out. "Come on, let's get you somewhere warm." The team guided them up the hill to the shelter, then immediately went back to search for more survivors. There was no time to rest. Second rescue, the Thompson brothers. Further down the street, they found the cracked window of the Thompson brothers' house. Snow had blasted through the living room, and the boys were trapped upstairs. "Help! We're up here. Please." The rescue group climbed the broken stairs. The wood groaned under their weight. The whole house shook from the snow pressure. "Hurry! This place could collapse," Amelia warned. The boys were wrapped together in blankets, shaking so badly their teeth chattered. Carlos lifted the youngest in his arms. "You're safe now," he said. "Let's get you out." The team helped them down carefully, stepping over busted furniture and broken wood. The moment they stepped outside, the boys started crying. "You found us, you really found us." "Yes," Amelia said softly. "We found you." A missing neighbor and a terrible truth. By the time they brought the boys back to the shelter, the storm had grown worse. Snow swirled in angry circles around the neighborhood. It was harder to breathe, harder to see, harder to keep moving. But the rescue team continued. House after house. Street after street. Each time shouting, "Hello? Anyone here?" Some houses were empty. Some people had already reached safety. Others were not as lucky. At one small home near the center of the neighborhood, they found something heartbreaking. A man was buried under the snow, too late to save. The team stood around him in silence. The storm howled around them, but for a moment, the world felt completely still. Amelia placed her hand on his arm. "We will tell your family," she whispered. The rescue team looked at each other, eyes heavy with sadness. "Let's keep moving," Carlos said quietly. "We don't stop searching for Karen." After nearly an hour in the storm, the rescue team had saved 14 people and found one person who didn't survive. But one person was still missing. One name no one wanted to talk about. One name some people thought didn't deserve saving. Karen Thompson. Mr. Patel hesitated. "Do we look for her?" Carlos didn't hesitate at all. "Yes. We look for everyone." Even the teenage boy nodded. Nobody deserves to die like this. They returned to Karen's home, though it barely looked like a home anymore. The porch was gone. Her fence was buried. The backyard had turned into a hill of snow. "Where do we even start?" one rescuer asked. Carlos looked around and pointed. "There. That's where she was last seen." They began digging. Fast. Hard. Determined. Minutes passed. Their hands felt numb. Their clothes soaked through. The storm felt like it wanted to push them back up the hill. "Keep going," Carlos shouted. Then, a sound. Soft. Weak. A tiny cry. "Help, anyone, please." "That's her," Amelia shouted. They dug faster, snow flying through the air. "Karen! Hold on!" Mr. Patel yelled. Another faint sound. "I can't breathe." After 5 more desperate minutes, they reached her arm. "She's alive," Carlos said. Working together, they cleared the snow around her body. She was trapped between broken fence pieces, shaking violently, her face pale and lips blue. When they lifted her out, she burst into tears. I thought I would die," Karen whispered. Carlos wrapped a blanket around her. "You're safe. We've got you." Karen stared at him, confused. "You saved me? After everything I did?" Carlos didn't answer. Because in a moment like this, helping someone wasn't about what they did. It was about being human. The storm finally began to soften after hours of screaming winds and freezing snow. By morning, Pineview Hills didn't look like a neighborhood anymore, it looked like a broken world made of ice. White mountains covered streets. Roofs peeked out like tiny islands in an ocean of frozen chaos. Cars, fences, trees, mailboxes, everything was buried, twisted, or crushed. But inside the emergency shelter, the survivors were safe. Cold, tired, shaking, but alive. The rescue team had saved 15 people. Only one life had been lost. And now, everyone waited. Restless. Angry. Scared. Waiting for the injured to wake up. Waiting for news about their homes. Waiting for answers. But mostly, waiting for Karen. She lay on a thin mattress in the corner of the shelter, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her face was pale, her hair was tangled with snow, and her hands kept shaking even though she tried to hide it. She stared at the wooden floor, unable to look anyone in the eye. No one approached her. No one asked if she was okay. No one even stood near her. People whispered to each other. "She caused this. It's her fault. She nearly killed us all. She set off fireworks in an avalanche zone, stupid." Karen heard everything. Every word stabbed her like cold needles. But she didn't argue. She didn't shout. She didn't blame anyone. She just sat in silence, chest tight, eyes red, breathing slowly as if each breath hurt. The meeting begins. Hours passed before the community leaders called everyone to gather. People stood in a large circle in the middle of the shelter. Carlos, Mr. Patel, Amelia the nurse, the Thompson brothers, the Dawsons, the Parkers, every surviving family. But Karen remained in the corner. Mr. Patel cleared his throat. His voice was steady, but his eyes were tired. "We need to talk about what happened," he said. "Everyone deserves to understand how this disaster started, and what happens next." People nodded. Some crossed their arms. Some glared toward Karen. Carlos spoke next. "First, we thank the rescue team. If we didn't work together, more people would have died." The shelter filled with quiet claps, tired smiles, and tears. The survivors hugged the rescuers and thanked them again. But when the applause died, the room grew heavy again. Anger returned. Fear returned. Pain returned. Everyone looked toward Karen. Everyone, except Karen herself. She kept staring at the floor. The accusations. A woman stepped forward. "My house is gone," she said. "My children almost froze to death." Why? Because of fireworks. In winter. Near an avalanche zone. Another man raised his hand angrily. "My mother is in the hospital. She may not walk again." Why? Because someone wanted to teach the neighborhood a lesson. The teenage boy who helped rescue Karen clenched his fists. "I almost died pulling people out. My friend was buried for minutes. Why did this have to happen?" Voices rose. Hands pointed. People cried. People shouted. And finally, someone asked the question everyone feared. "Karen, why did you do it?" The room fell silent. Karen didn't answer. Her lips trembled. Her fingers squeezed the blanket. Her feet curled up under her. But she stayed silent. "Speak," an older woman said sharply. "We all lost something. We deserve to hear your side." Slowly, very slowly, Karen lifted her eyes. They were red, tired, full of shame. I didn't think," she whispered. Her voice was so soft that half the room leaned forward. "What?" someone snapped. Louder. Karen took a shaky breath. Then another. "I didn't think it would be this bad," she said. "I knew the mountains were risky, but I didn't believe one firework could start an avalanche. I thought everyone was ignoring my winter rules. I thought I needed to show I was in control." Her voice cracked. "And now look what I've done." A few people scoffed. "You wanted control," someone shouted. "Well, now look. You controlled a disaster." "My family almost died," another yelled. "People lost homes. You ruined everything." Karen flinched with each word. She squeezed her eyes shut like the voices were hitting her. Carlos finally stepped forward. "That's enough," he said firmly. "We know she made a mistake. A terrible one. And we can decide what happens next. But yelling won't fix anything." The room quieted, though anger still burned in many eyes. Karen's confession. Karen opened her eyes. For the first time since the avalanche, she forced herself to stand. Her knees shook so badly that Amelia stepped forward, ready to catch her if she collapsed. But Karen raised a hand, signaling she wanted to speak. She looked around at the neighbors she had controlled for so long, people she fined, scolded, and threatened. And she finally confessed. "I acted like I owned this place," she said. "I thought rules mattered more than people. I argued about decorations, mailboxes, grass length, stupid things. I pushed everyone away." She swallowed hard. "And when no one listened to me anymore, I got angry. I thought I needed to show power. I wanted to scare people into following my rules again. Her voice started to break. But I didn't scare you. I destroyed everything. Some people softened. Others stayed cold. Karen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I know that. But I want you to know. I'm sorry. I mean it. Tears rolled down her cheeks. If I could take it back, I would. If I could trade places with the man who died, I would. I didn't want anyone hurt. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Mr. Patel spoke. Thank you for being honest. Now we need to decide what happens next with the HOA. The vote. People murmured among themselves. Some wanted Karen punished. Some wanted her banned from the neighborhood. Some wanted her arrested. Some just wanted peace. Finally, Mr. Patel raised his hand. We will vote. Like a community. Together. Carlos nodded. This isn't about revenge. This is about fairness. The vote was simple. Should Karen remain the HOA leader? One by one, people raised their hands. Hands went up immediately. Dozens. Almost everyone. Except Karen. She didn't vote. Mr. Patel counted. 28 votes to remove her, he said. 0 to keep her. Karen lowered her head. Carlos walked to her. Karen, the community has decided. You are no longer the HOA leader. Karen nodded slowly. I understand. And, Mr. Patel added, you will need to help pay for damages. The court will decide the amount, but you will not escape responsibility. Karen wiped her tears again. I will pay whatever I can. I'll do whatever I need to do. You'll also join recovery work, Amelia said. Everyone must help rebuild. Karen nodded again. For the first time. I will help my neighbors, not control them. A small, unexpected moment. As the meeting ended, people slowly returned to their seats. Some still angry. Some relieved. Some thoughtful. Karen sat back down, exhausted. Suddenly, the teenage boy walked over and placed a cup of warm tea in front of her. She stared at him, confused. You saved people, he said quietly. You messed up. But you didn't run. And you told the truth. Karen looked down, her eyes filling again. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, he said. The hard part starts now. Then he walked away, leaving Karen alone with her thoughts. For the first time in her life, she understood. Leadership wasn't about rules. It was about people. And she had forgotten that. Now she had to rebuild more than homes. She had to rebuild trust. And that was the hardest job of all. The sun finally rose over Pineview Hills after 2 long days of storms. The light did not bring warmth, not yet, but it brought something the survivors had been waiting for. A clear view. And what they saw took everyone's breath away. The neighborhood looked like a frozen battlefield. Massive hills of snow stood where houses once stood. Roofs were cracked, fences snapped in half, cars buried so deep they looked like old fossils. Trees leaned sideways, their branches twisted and broken. Every step made a deep crunch under the heavy ice. But there was also something new in the air. Not fear. Not anger. Not blame. Something quieter. Softer. Hope. For the first time since the avalanche hit, Pineview Hills was ready to rebuild. The first morning of recovery. People slowly stepped out of the shelter, wrapped in blankets, boots, and borrowed coats. They stood in small groups, staring at what remained of their homes. Some cried silently. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Some simply placed a hand on a neighbor's shoulder, as if to say, "We survived. That is what matters." Carlos, Mr. Patel, Amelia, and the rescue team spread maps on a wooden table outside the shelter. "All right," Carlos said. "First, we dig out the main road. Then we clear the houses that still have people trapped inside basements. After that, we start checking the gas lines and power boxes." People nodded. This was their new reality. A long, hard road ahead. And then, walking slowly, carefully, nervously, came Karen. Wrapped in a thick scarf, holding a small shovel, she approached the group. Her eyes stayed low, her steps hesitant. No one said anything. For a moment, it felt like the entire neighborhood held its breath. Karen stopped in front of the group. Her voice was quiet, almost shaking. "I'm here to help," she said. Not as the HOA leader. Not as the woman who controlled everyone. Not as someone giving orders. Just a neighbor. Just a person. Carlos studied her face. She looked tired, scared, and embarrassed, but also sincere. He nodded. "All right, Karen. You helped dig out the west side with us." There were a few murmurs in the group, but no one argued. Not today. Not anymore. Working side by side. The work began at sunrise. People lifted shovels. People pulled sleds filled with supplies. People broke ice with metal bars, searching for doors, windows, anything that could lead them inside trapped homes. Karen worked silently among them. No complaints. No orders. No rude comments. She dug until her arms shook. She carried heavy buckets of ice. She helped clear the Thompson brothers' driveway. At one house, she stopped suddenly and pressed a hand to her mouth. It was Mr. Dawson, the elderly man whose wife had been trapped under frozen rubble. Their house was nearly destroyed, the roof half gone, the inside filled with snow. Karen walked over and bowed her head. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Mrs. Dawson placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do now." Karen looked shocked at the kindness, but also relieved. Then she kept digging. A turning point. Around noon, the teenage boy, the same one who had helped rescue her, climbed onto a pile of snow and shouted, "We found someone!" A voice under the old picnic shelter. Everyone rushed to help. They dug fast, clearing the collapsed wooden beams. And then they heard it. A faint knock. "Someone's alive down there!" Amelia shouted. The rescue team worked like lightning. And finally, after 20 minutes, they uncovered a trapped teenager named Lily, shivering but alive. Her mother cried so loudly it echoed across the valley. Karen stood nearby, watching the rescue. Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she understood something deeply. Saving someone felt better than controlling someone. Karen's biggest test. Later that afternoon, while digging near the community park, Karen heard a crashing sound. She turned to see a tall tree beginning to fall from the weight of snow. A little girl was standing right in its path. "Move!" Karen screamed. Without thinking, she dropped her shovel and sprinted across the snow. Her boots slipped, her balance wobbled, but she kept running. She reached the girl, grabbed her tightly, and rolled both of them out of the way just in time. The tree slammed down behind them, shaking the ground. The girl cried in her arms. Karen held her close, rocking gently. "I've got you," she whispered. "You're safe. I promise." A crowd gathered, gasping. Carlos helped them up and stared at Karen in surprise. "You saved her life," he said. Karen shook her head. "No. I just did what anyone would do. But not everyone would have. Not before." And the neighbors knew that. For the first time since the avalanche, people looked at Karen not with anger or fear, but with respect. A community dinner in the snow. As evening came, someone started a fire in a sheltered area. People cooked simple food: potatoes, canned soup, bread from emergency kits. They passed plates around, shared blankets, told stories, and laughed softly. It wasn't a celebration. It was survival. It was unity. Karen sat alone at first. But then, surprisingly, the Thompson brothers sat beside her. We wanted to thank you," the younger one said, "for helping us today." Karen smiled weakly. "I owed all of you that." A few minutes later, Mrs. Parker offered her a bowl of hot soup. Then Mr. Patel invited her to sit closer to the fire. One by one, people began including her. Not full trust. Not forgiveness. But something softer. A beginning. Rebuilding begins. Over the next few days, rescue teams from nearby towns arrived with bulldozers, medical vans, and volunteers. The National Guard helped move giant piles of snow. Engineers checked the mountain for another avalanche. News reporters filmed the neighborhood, calling it the Avalanche Miracle because so many survivors were found alive. Everywhere, people worked together. Children formed lines to carry supplies. Men used chainsaws to cut fallen trees. Women cooked food for exhausted workers. Amelia ran a medical tent. And Karen? She became one of the hardest workers of all. She helped rebuild the community center. She delivered hot tea to the rescue crews. She guided volunteers around the neighborhood because she knew every house, every family, every detail. People slowly started calling her by her name, not HOA Karen. Just Karen. A final conversation. One evening, after a long day of clearing snow, Karen sat on a broken bench, watching the sunset over the mountains. The sky was orange and purple, shining over the snow-covered valley. Carlos sat beside her. "You did good today," he said. Karen let out a small laugh. "I did good because I had to fix what I broke." Carlos shook his head. "You can't change the past. But you changed yourself." Karen looked down at her hands, red from cold, cracked from work. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she said softly. Carlos shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not. But forgiveness isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. Day by day. And you're earning it." For the first time in years, Karen felt something warm in her chest. Not pride. Not power. Not control. Humility. And hope. A new beginning. Weeks later, the roads were clear. Homes were being rebuilt. New emergency rules were written by a group of neighbors, not one person. Children played in the snow again. Laughter returned. Life returned. And the community held a small ceremony beside the rebuilt park. They planted a tree, a tall, strong pine, to honor the man who had died in the avalanche. Karen placed a small wooden plaque at its base. Her hand shook as she set it down. The sign read, "In memory of those we lost. In gratitude for those who saved us. In hope for a better tomorrow." Everyone stood in silence. Then Mr. Patel turned to Karen. "You did a terrible thing," he said gently. "But you helped create something good after it." Karen nodded, eyes moist. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make things right." Carlos placed a hand on her shoulder. "You already started," he said. She looked out at the neighborhood, the place she once tried to control with rules but now understood with heart. Pineview Hills wasn't perfect. It wasn't fully repaired. And it still carried scars of the avalanche. But something beautiful happened in the wreckage. People changed. Forgiveness grew. And a community was reborn. Karen closed her eyes and breathed in the cold mountain air. For the first time, she didn't feel like the boss. She felt like she belonged. And that, she realized, was the greatest rebuild of all.